live with Greg Olsen, Director of the New York State Office for the Aging.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us. My name is Greg Olsen, and I'm the Director of the New York State Office for Aging. You know, we do a lot of great programs. We started this back in March of 2020 and have done hundreds of programs, and I think all the content has been spectacular to date. But I am exceptionally excited about today's program. As many of you know by now, our office has spent literally the last 15 years gathering facts and data to combat ageism and talk about older adults in a different light. You know, and as a father of two girls, you know, growing up and watching television shows or reading books, seeing cartoons and how older adults were portrayed was really horrifying. So according to the World Health Organization, children as young as 4 years old become aware of their culture's age stereotypes. Many of these portrayals are reinforced by children's books and other media, and I've witnessed that firsthand. And so today I'm so excited to introduce Lindsey McDivitt, who is an author who is as passionate as we are about tackling ageism in books for children, because all the isms start when you're younger, including through her blog, A is for Aging. We're going to discuss the power of children's books in shaping attitudes about aging and the ways that older adults and adults of all ages, frankly, can discuss this issue with younger generations and hopefully stop or curtail or even minimize the ageist attitudes that people have, because it's something that we really shouldn't be tolerating. So before I get to Lindsey, and again, welcome, Lindsey, we're going to have a quick break. As many of you know, we are actively trying to get the word out on New York's Medicare savings program. So if you're an individual whose income is around $2,200 a month, or you are a couple around $2,800 a month, we can help put $7,000 back in your Social Security checks. If you are enrolled in Medicare savings program or MSP, it is something that you have to renew every single year or else you lose that benefit. But why don't you take a look at this video and learn a little bit more.
Hi, my name is Heather Leddick with New York State Office for the Aging Health Insurance Information, Counseling, and Assistance Program. The Medicare Savings Program is a program designed to save Medicare beneficiaries up to $7,000 annually. For those of you currently receiving the benefit, don't forget you may need to renew. Notices can come from your local Department of Social Services, your Medicare Advantage Health Plan, or New York State of Health. Don't miss out. Return your renewal form today. You wouldn't want to lose out on this important benefit that helps save you money. If you have any questions in regards to the renewal or the Medicare Savings Program, you can reach out to HICAP at 1-800-701-0501. Thank you.
Please call that number, and thanks so much, Heather. So Lindsey, again, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here, and first and foremost, want to thank you for what you're doing. We need a lot more people that are doing what you're doing, what we're trying to do across this country. Tell us a little bit about how you got started writing books for children, because I also know that you did work in your earlier career with older adults.
I did. Thank you so much for having me here. I really am appreciative of your team and of the attention brought to the topic today. I worked with older adults for many decades, actually, first in long-term care, and then I worked with stroke survivors, providing education and support programs in rehab and in hospitals. Then I was laid off back in, I think it was 2009, with a recession. There were no jobs in my field, and it was the middle of a Minnesota winter, pretty desperate to get out of the house. So I took my laptop and I went to, coffee shops, and I started writing, and I'd always wanted to write, but writing picture books, I have to say, it was a steep learning curve. It's like poetry. Every word counts. They, prefer actually really low word counts, like under 500 words. If you're writing nonfiction, you're doing as much research as you are for an adult nonfiction book, but you have to compress it all into about 1,800 words possibly. And you have to pair, your words will be paired with art. So you have to think about what the art will show versus what your words will will show. So I started thinking really a long time ago about how age is portrayed in picture books, and so it was a good fit. I really think I used my skills that I learned in my earlier career.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about like 2009, so that really wasn't all that long ago. And while there was a steep learning curve, obviously you've been successful. One of the things I want to ask you, though, because I find this fascinating, is what inspired you, though, to examine the issue of aging in your writing? Was that because of the work that you had done prior to, or tell us a little bit about that?
That's a good question. In part, it certainly was in part the work I was doing, but I had this amazing experience in my 20s, my early 20s. I was working in long-term care, and a convention happened in Minneapolis where Betty Friedan was one of the main speakers, the author, and she had just published her Fountain of Age. She was totally eye-opening and inspiring. And then also I heard Maggie Kuhn. Some people might be aware of Maggie, who is just the fiery, radical older person who started Grey Panthers many years ago, an advocacy group for older citizens. And that was so eye-opening, I can't tell you. I realized, I was like 24, that I really had no conception of what it meant to grow older, that I had been influenced by all the wrong images. And I started reading incessantly. And I just really found that I was fascinated. I've since continued to read a lot about aging, and then about ageism.
I think that's great. And, we're very similar in our timeline. So I've been doing this for 33 years, started in my 20s working with older adults. And people like my grandmother and some of the organizations that I worked for, where the board of directors were all older adults, not only their life experiences, but what they were continuing to give back just didn't match what I would read, see, television, movies, et cetera, and anti-aging culture. So, I'm with you. It just didn't match my lived experience. So let's dive in really to what it is you actually do. Can you give some specific examples of the portrayals in children's book that present older adults in a negative light and are really ageist?
Yeah, I was really quite astonished. I had to read a lot of picture books in order to learn what publishers are looking for now. They were different from what I read to my kids. And I kept encountering these horrible stereotypes. And after working with stroke survivors whose lives changed overnight, I just couldn't believe that so many people were portrayed as, kind of pitiable, people who were forgetful and frail and grumpy and lonely and so forth. And certainly with all stereotypes, you can find older people like that, but they are actually in the minority. And I don't mean to ever devalue people who are unfortunate enough to be in those situations. And I do think that there's a need for picture books, about a grandparent with Alzheimer's, for instance. But I found that there were so many stereotypes that was pretty much all I was seeing. And some of them used words like fusty and dusty and musty and rusty and grumpy and frumpy. And those are the kind that really totally exploit the stereotypes. Luckily, there's very few of those, but there's so many that are well-meaning, even tender and warm, heartwarming books, but they still perpetuate those negative stereotypes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, one of the things that when I was fortunate to get into this position is we scrubbed really specific language out of everything that we did. We don't talk about, we say older adult. We don't say elderly, senior citizen, and not because I think those are bad words, but they elicit exactly what you're talking about, a negative view of older people, somebody who's a taker, that's frail, that has Alzheimer's disease, that's in a nursing home. And as you said, that is the minority, and it's our responsibility to help take care of individuals like that. But 75 to 80% of older adults are active, healthy, working, volunteering, contributing to their communities and their families in so many ways. I mentioned the World Health Organization and how pliable the young brain is, not only to ageism, but racism, homophobia, sexism, etc. What impressions do these depictions have on a young person?
Yeah, it's really kind of scary because ageism flies under the radar. You mentioned like racism and sexism, and there's been a lot more attention in recent years to eradicating those stereotypes from picture books and from children's literature. There's not a lot of attention paid yet to ageism, although it is starting, which is encouraging. But it's so damaging. You know, we're instilling these negative stereotypes in kids when they're so young, and those of us who are aware of ageism know that it really damages cognitive health, physical health, and even longevity. I'm sure you've heard about the astonishing research by Becca Levy out of Yale University about stereotype embodiment, how we take those age stereotypes into ourselves over a lifetime, and they actually have an effect on our cardiovascular health, our brain health, even our hearing. It's really fascinating, but it just proves that her theory talks about we're taking it in from our society over our whole lifetime and in so many ways. And the longer that you're exposed to that, the more damage. So I think early intervention's definitely warranted.
Yeah, and I thought, years ago, I had thought that other cultures treat their older adults differently, and some certainly do. But I had met a researcher from Germany who had been to Japan and some of the other countries in the United States. And when we were talking about this, he said the similarities in other cultures are similar to the United States. Now, it's not across the board, but I was kind of surprised to hear that. If you had some advice for parents, grandparents, other influential adults in a younger person's lives, how could they explain or point out or even be thinking about if they're reading books or watching television, pointing out the negative portrayals, and what should they do?
I think number one, it's talk about aging, talk about growing older. So many times it's an uncomfortable topic, and people aren't really feeling very knowledgeable. And the most that a child might hear, apart from all the stereotypes coming in, bombarding them from the media, is a comment like they might ask about someone in the grocery store, just to be told, well, yes, that person is old and that's why they can't walk very well. So unless we talk about the fact that growing older is natural and normal, that every life stage, talk about in important positive ways, every life stage has good things in it, and that those are stereotypes. I think let's talk about aging, number one, talk about it in positive ways, talk about it, the negatives. Don't look away, don't ignore them. I think critical thinking in kids is something that you want them to learn anyway, but you certainly want them to look at a portrayal of a person and have an adult, as a model saying, that doesn't fit with what I really know.
Right. That's one of the reasons I am so proud to work in this network. We have a lot of our county offices for the aging and other groups that are doing intergenerational programming so that you have those types of interactions. We partnered with Joy for All Ageless Innovation to do over 100 intergenerational games since September. We're going to continue to do those because if you're not around somebody that's older, those stereotypes remain the same. But when you get people together, they learn it's themselves, just adding the age. And, one of the things I ask folks when, I speak is, when you were in your 20s, what did you think old was? And the answer is usually the same, and it's around 50. And we just didn't make those things up. This is how culture, right, makes us think. And, I jokingly say on October 5th of 2018, I woke up that morning and I was 50. And guess what? Nothing was different. Nothing changed. So I just find it fascinating. So tell us about your website and blog. So it's A is for aging, B is for books. Why did you start it? And what type of information can people find?
So I started the website and blog in about 2013, I believe. And I learned that it was considered important for an author to have a website and a blog. So a blog can be really boring, and it also can be boring for the person writing it. So I thought I have to pick something I'm passionate about and won't lose interest in. And I'd been seeing, like I said, all these stereotypes in picture books. So I decided to showcase the positive, that what I call age positive picture books. So I review picture books on the blog, and then I add them to my growing list that's on the website. So the website has a number of resources, including this list of picture books, which are minus age stereotypes. It also has some resources for writers, so that they can hopefully write about growing older in positive, accurate ways. It has some resources for adults, some books that I've read and enjoyed and feel are really helpful. And that's a great way, as adults who want to influence your kids in a positive way, apart from searching out age positive picture books, educate yourself. There's tremendous books out there, and they're really readable. They're really, I think, quite fascinating. But right now, the two that I think of are This Chair Rocks by Ashton Applewhite and Breaking the Age Code by Becca Levy, the scientist that I mentioned earlier. But the website also, in the blog posts, I try and give some tips, like questions to ask kids when you're reading the book, and some activities possibly related, and sometimes even little quotes and anecdotes from some of the books about aging for adults.
That's fantastic. Can you go into a little bit more detail about what does an age positive picture book really look like? Are we talking mainly about illustrations? Is it text, storytelling, or is it really checking D, all of the above?
Yeah, most definitely all of the above. The graphic that's up there now really illustrates that an age positive book can look like a whole variety. It can be any kind of picture book, really, fiction or nonfiction. There's, of course, grandparent books, and lots of people search out grandparent books for their kids. Some are age positive, some are not. There's an awful lot where the grandparent needs the child's help, and they fit those age stereotypes. There's others that I consider very age positive. There's been kind of a proliferation of picture books lately that show different cultures, and they have like a grandparent teaching a skill, like making tofu or flan, or teaching a kid Tai Chi, that kind of thing. I think that's really positive. There's a new, not really new genre, but something that's really taken off in the last 5-6 years, and that's picture book biographies. And 3 of my books are picture book bios, and I really think highly of them. Many of them show, it's an older adult that's worked their whole life, and they've followed a passion or an interest, and they persevered in order to meet their goal. Certainly these people are people of note, often famous, but not always. And some people have concerns about exceptionalism, and I don't ever want to say, well, we only think what's age positive is maybe what I call a super senior, somebody who's only running marathons at 80 or something. But the picture book bios really does highlight things like perseverance, and they are, I think, things that kids can relate to, even adults can relate to.
Yeah, I think that's, I think you're absolutely right. And, I don't want to get to a point, as I know I'll be 60 in 5 years, which is just fascinating to even wrap around my head. But, I don't want to be that person, and nobody should be that person who's seen, like you talked about, the person in the grocery store, that it's just an old person. I'm not going to go through my life, but everybody has a tremendous amount of passions and hobbies and what they did for a living, the things they did outside, raising kids, and we should be seen as the human beings that we are, not somebody who has some, fake age to it. So besides your blog and website, are you kind of the, one of the lead people in how you can find a variety of positive examples of children's books? Is there a repository like that? And are you seeing an improvement in the portrayal of older adults?
Well, I'm glad you asked those questions. So I wanted to be sure and mention Dr. Sandra McGuire. when I first started blogging about the age positive picture books, I did a lot of searching online, and that's how I found Becca Levy's research. But I also found Dr. McGuire, and she has been searching out picture books that portray older characters in positive ways for more than 30 years. And
Wow.
she maintains a list that's also linked to my website several places. And she's kind of an advisor to my website too. But she updates her list every year and adds new books. The blog posts, I think the reviews I do give you more information, and activities, like I said, Sandra's list you can even download and print, gives brief descriptions of the books. But she's worked in aging education for years. She's a real powerhouse, really knowledgeable. I think you asked, is the situation getting better?
Yeah.
It is in some regards. I look at what books are coming out, so I don't just find books by chance. I look and see what books are going to be published and so forth, and search out the positive ones. And I do feel like I'm seeing more positive books. The ones on the screen here, actually, I have the book. The illustration on the left is an amazing book that I just love, and this is a new development. You can see it's called How Old Am I? By Julie Peugeot, illustrations, photographs by JR, who is a French street artist, and it's from Phaidon Books. So inside you can see the illustration there with the older woman and the 94. It has little profiles that spread like that for every age from 1 through 100. And it's really the first book that I've seen that shows kids someone aging, different people aging. They can easily identify it. And it's so positive because each person gives a little bit of a story about themselves, and they live in different countries around the world, and they all have goals and dreams. And it's super inspiring. It's just amazing. And then they also have another book out from Phaidon with JR's art called Wrinkles, also really, really positive, and talking about where wrinkles come from and how that's showing somebody's life. It's really great. And another really positive thing I've seen is like the title Old to Joy. Actually, in the description from the publisher that shows up even on Amazon, it talks about how it's a terrific intergenerational book that encourages healthy aging. I've never seen that before. And that's really inspiring. The author illustrator came out with that. And one more thing, you don't have a picture, but I have to tout this book. It's called Just Like Grandma, and it's by Kim Rogers. The editor of the book at Heart Drum Publisher is Cynthia Leidick Smith, and Cynthia has been a champion of my blog and my website since the very beginning. So I was so gratified to see in the back that in addition to an author's note, there's an editor's note from Cynthia talking about the need for older role models, talking to children about their older role models and how important they are to their life. So super encouraging.
And it's interesting when you're talking about how old I am with the 94-year-old, you made a statement that I really want to underscore, that regardless of your age, you still have passions and dreams and hobbies. You're not like hanging things up. And I know that, and you know that, but I think it's really important to say. I was going to ask you why we think there are age stereotypes in books, but I think we already covered that. So I'm going to ask you two things just for your opinion. Do you find there's less stereotypes in intergenerational households, meaning where you would have a grandparent, their kids, and then the grandkids all under one roof, number one. And secondly, do you find that as authors get older, they get it a little bit more, and maybe younger authors, again, because we live in an ageist society, might, not on purpose be writing these types of books, but as they get older, their perception, because they're living it, changes?
I think that it's the first part of your question. Just remind me. Sorry.
It was about intergenerational households.
Right.
And actually
I'm not
living every
sure.
day.
I wanted to clarify with you. Are you talking about the way they're portrayed in picture books, or just in general when kids are at school?
Yeah, just in general.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've read some interesting studies on that where surprisingly, it shows that children, even who have great relationships with older adults, including their grandparents, still buy into the age stereotypes. And apparently what happens is that they see a person who doesn't fit that stereotype as an exception. So that's in part why I feel like it's really significant to flood children with lots and lots of examples, to read them these age positive books and to challenge those stereotypes. I think it's not enough to just expect that, oh well, they have an active vital grandmother as a role model.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right about that. What about authors that are getting older? Do you see, a change in, I guess, their books? Because, if you start as a children's book author, I mean, maybe you'll venture out differently, but I would assume this is something you're going to continue to do. So you like me are getting older as well. I wonder if that changes the dynamic at all.
I have to say, I don't know. I haven't explored that. Probably would be really interesting to explore. My guess would be that unless ageism is really on that author or illustrator's radar, that it might not make any difference, despite the fact that they see themselves as an exception possibly to the stereotypes. Right. And part of the problem we didn't discuss is that, publishers generally want the child to be the active character, to be the protagonist in stories. And so what happens is authors are looking for a storyline that makes the kid the helper or the active person. If they want to include an older character, then they often sadly reach for those negative age stereotypes. It's like the child is going to fix the grumpy next door neighbor, or help the lonely older woman, or help forgetful grandmother, this kind of thing. And again, not to value those people that actually have these issues, but too often this is what kids see over and over again.
Yeah, that's important. And you used a couple. Well, you had a lot of words, but things like he's grumpy or he's stubborn. And I always tell people, if you're probably grumpy and stubborn in your 20s, and you carry that through your entire life. It just doesn't happen one day when you wake up and you're 72 or whatever.
Exactly.
I see that we have some questions, but before we get to the questions, Lindsey, we're going to take another break. Next month is March, which is National Nutrition Month. And for those of you that have been around us, we oversee with our partners the largest nutrition program in the country. In March, we talk a lot about the value of this program, the need for volunteers. Food is medicine, and what a critical role our programs and others around the state and the country make. So check this out. Thank you. So, Lindsey, let's talk a little bit about your books. Tell us about your age-positive picture books.
So I found that even before I was actively thinking I want to write an age-positive picture book, I naturally, I think with my long interest in older people and so on, I'm drawn to people who have accomplished interesting things in their later life, or that have lived a long life and done different things over that long lifetime. So I've written about Gwen Frostic, who's a nature artist and early environmentalist in Nature's Friend. And I wanted to also mention she had a disability since childhood, and I don't ever want to exclude someone who's older with a disability. That's not the point of an age-positive book. It's just that so many of them show that person as pitiable and needing fixing, and that's ableism piled onto ageism. So I do have some books, like for instance, this one's not mine, but Henri's Scissors, about Henri Matisse, where he's bedridden in his 80s and he's still creating and he's happy. He calls it one of the best times of his life. So, but yes, I wrote about President Gerald Ford and President Nelson Mandela, both of whom became president in their 60s and their 70s. And then my only fiction book that's out already is Christmas Fairies for Oma, which is based on a true story from my childhood. And I love the illustrations in that book by Katarzyna Bukier that show a really vital, active grandmother living across the sea from her granddaughter.
I think that's great. Alex, Darren, can you put up the questions from the audience for Lindsey? There we go. What can older adults do to help break these stereotypes? Great
question. Well, my kids would tell you, my now grown kids would tell you, start young. And my mother was fortunately a very vital older person, and she would say things like, I'm not decrepit. Don't treat me like that. She would call out people. But I also challenge those stereotypes. I'm an older adult now at 66, and I freely challenge them. I try to be tactful and not hurtful, but yeah, I say to people, well, that doesn't fit with what I know, or I see many people who don't fit that. And I say that's ageism. That's a stereotype.
Yeah, we every year we highlight over 100 older adults in a big ceremony during Older Americans Month in Albany for their unbelievable contributions to their communities, to their families. And at a very early age, I would bring my daughters every single year so that they could interact, or I'd bring them to meetings and other things. And it's really important for them to see that, as you said earlier, it's not the exception. That there's 2 or 3 generations of people that are 60 and older, and they're all different, just like everybody else. Here's a question: for age stereotypes, can you suggest a conversation starter or starters that older adults can have with their young family members?
Sure. I wanted to just address quickly what you said, that something about multiple generations. And I think that's what happens too often in the picture books and in conversation, is that old is old, and it could be 2 or 3 different generations. Lots of kids nowadays have great grandparents in their lives too. And in too many books, they're just like those old stereotypes, they're rolling those generations into one. But for conversation starters, the picture books are a great way to start conversations. I just think that it's so powerful to sit down with a kid next to you or on your lap and page through a picture book and read the text and look at the pictures and talk about growing older as normal. If there's something in the book that you don't like, then talk about that too. Say, I don't like how they portrayed that older person. That doesn't fit with what I know. You can protect the kids up to a certain point. Like I just recently learned, I have a 2-year-old grandson. I just recently learned about Grandma Shark, Baby Shark and Grandma Shark, where there's all these little hand gestures. And the Grandma Shark one is this, like a toothless grandma. I was just shocked. And that's everywhere. It's all over the internet. And so I think I answered your question, I hope.
Yeah, and because I know that song also. My kids are a little older now, but it wasn't that long ago. And I think of things like that my kids love, SpongeBob, and how they portray the older fish. Other things on television. It does seem like things are slowly moving in the right direction. I don't hear some of the traditional words anymore. One of the things that drives me nuts is silver tsunami, because a tsunami is one of the most destructive things, right? And so it's just amazing how powerful language is that we really take for granted. Do we have another question? Yep. What is the best way to get in touch with you? And that's the key question.
Oh, definitely through my website, which you can go to lindseymcdivitt.com or aisforaging.com. Either one will get you there. And I have a contact page there where you can just send me a message. But the my books are available anywhere that you would want to look. Amazon, but I often advocate, please go to your local bookstore or use bookshop.org to support your local bookstore.
Excellent. Before I let you go, Lindsey, and this has been a lot of fun for me, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to say, or anything that you've said that you just want to underscore?
I guess I just like to underscore that there are negative books out there, but I understand the authors and the illustrators and even the publishers just are ignorant of the issue of ageism. And I'm hoping that, we can continue to educate them along with the general public. But I don't think there's anybody that's trying to harm children or with the stereotypes or harm the rest of us. It's just become one of those things that people don't see. It's under the radar.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I'm really glad that you said that. And I can provide some advice to folks out there as well. If you're in a bookstore, actually open up the book and read it before you purchase it, and look at the pictures so that you are getting the types of books that are going to be positive, not only for older adults, but really for everybody. Because I think that, if we're able to do things earlier on in life, it'll make everybody's life so much better. So Lindsey McDivitt, I thank you so much for what you do. I think this is absolutely fantastic. I'm really excited that we were able to connect with you, to have you share your expertise. And hopefully this will give food for thought to those that are watching today or will be watching in the future. Our next show is March 7th. As I mentioned, March is National Nutrition Month. The New York State Office for Aging and our partners provide roughly 300,000 older adults with 25 million meals every single year. I want to, as always, thank our communication staff, Alex Hyatt, Darren, and Roger, who always make this production extraordinary. And again, a big thanks to Lindsey McDivitt, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you so much.
Live with Greg is a production of the New York State Office for the Aging Communications Bureau.